Okay, now we are on. Okay, welcome everyone. Hjärtligt välkommen allesammen. On behalf of Forbundet Frie Fotografer and Fotogalleriet, I'm Antonio Cataldo and I'm the artistic director of Fotogalleriet in Oslo, where currently the spring exhibition is being held. I want to quickly introduce and give the welcome to all the artists that were part of the spring exhibition: Hedevig Anker, Tanya Busse, Yamile Calderon, who produced the work in collaboration with Edward, who is not present today, Tobias Liljedahl, Tor-Finn Malum, Fitje, Giulia Mangione, Vegar Muen, who is not present. For the artists who could not be present today, don't worry, because on Saturday, the 4th of April at 1 p.m., you should not miss a live tour of the exhibition in the space with artist Niels Munch-Blom. Niels, an artist himself, is currently hijacking Fotogalleriet media and content platform and will give a very subjective tour of the exhibition based on conversation that he had with the artist in preparation of the exhibition opening. This year, we are reaching the 39th iteration of the spring exhibition, which was established in 1976 in opposition to the autumn exhibition held at Kunstnerhus, which was at the time the official salon for contemporary art in Norway. And at the time, the artists decided, and photographers in particular, to create a new platform for showcasing and promoting photographic art solely to be properly recognized within the larger art field. And the spring exhibition, the Vårutstilling, is a long-standing collaboration between FFF, Forbundet Frie Fotografer, and Fotogalleriet since 1978. The exhibition is produced by FFF, and this year it was juried by Sverre Strandberg, who also served as the jury leader and the exhibition curator, together with other jury members, Kjersti Wetterstad and Hanne Hammerstien. The spring exhibition continues to be an important peer-to-peer review of trends, propositions, and anxieties affecting the photographic field coming from previous years, from the previous year. It is still a salon in many ways where artists use the space of the exhibition with a different curatorial intent, including to provide a platform for the artistic work to be acquired by collecting institutions. So this is both a call and a plea to local museums, especially to get closer to the institution, and also to the artists presenting their work within this exhibition to preserve their work for the future. So just get in touch. That we live in a peculiar times, as we are all in Zoom at the moment, one of the digital platforms allowing us to still continuing our dialogues. This was clear even before the COVID-19 pandemic, which has simply accelerated, to appropriate a philosophical term, the paradoxes of the world we live within. Global flowing of capital, global warming, nation states losing sovereignty over international corporations, lack of strong welfare care, equality, and so on and so forth. And this comes very strongly within the exhibition that we are about to explore. I wanted to quickly read a quotation by Sverre Strandberg, which was released in mid-February, when we couldn't expect that part of the Western world to be taken aback by the very system it has created. I'm quoting from him. This year edition of the spring exhibition is a meditation on climate change, terror, and threats that affect the Earth's current status quo. All the contributing works to the exhibition are original and show tendencies connected to perspectives of zooming in and further away. With this, I'm about to invite the artists to come forward and tell us a little bit about their work. We'll go chronologically, as the idea also of this conversation this afternoon is to replace the physical exploration of the exhibition with a one-to-one conversations with the artists, with instead speaking about the work and unraveling the formation of the exhibitions through PowerPoint presentations and the words coming from all of the artists within the exhibition. I wanted just to quickly thank Anne Sund-Schovold, the project leader for the spring exhibition, as well as Kjersti Solberg Monsen, the managing director of FFF, and all the team of FFF for this collaboration. I wanted also to thank the members of Fotogalleriet team, including Håkon Lillegraven and Una Mathisen Gjerde, for making the Zoom meeting hopefully run smoothly. And also, last but not least, Alf Ollet, who mounted the exhibition at Fotogalleriet and probably is following us from home. So, when you arrive at Fotogalleriet, the first work that you encounter is by an Italian artist currently based in Bergen, Giulia. So maybe, Giulia, you can start and tell us a little bit about your work.
Hi, everyone. Can't see myself now, but I guess it's fine. As Antonio said, I'm from Italy, but I lived in Scandinavia in the past 5-6 years. First, I lived in Denmark, and then I moved to Norway. And now I'm currently living in Bergen, where I am now. It's a very windy day here. I'm an artist and I live in Bergen, and I'm going to present a work that is my most recent one. And like Antonio said, is currently on show at Fotogalleriet in Oslo, and it can actually be seen a little bit from the windows because it's the first piece that you see when you enter the gallery. Therefore, because some of the pictures are facing the inner side of the gallery and some pictures are facing outside, some part of the installation can still be seen if you walk by. So this work is called Close Encounters, and it contains images that I made from 2016 until January this year. Are we seeing the presentation already? I'm not.
No. Yes.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah, we can start here. So, like I said, this work, I began working at this project as a need to somehow leave a trace of the world as I see it, which is also the motivation behind why I photograph in the first place. We can move to the next slide. Thank you. So in the making of this work, my thoughts were often crossed by some recent environmental concerns that placed before our eyes the fact that mankind's life on our planet will end at some point, and that our planet will keep on going without us. And therefore, I mean, these studies, of course, have been carried on since the 70s, but I guess this urgency to do something for the environment kind of became more, much more pressing now, especially with Greta Thunberg, for instance. So this is one main idea that I had. It was this environmental concerns. And the other one, we can move to the next slide, is the notion of the desert. So what you can see here is an installation shot of how I installed the work at Fotogalleriet. And somehow I was inspired by the desert, because it's I feel that it's an utmost mysterious and treacherous and even deceitful place in a way. And it can also be considered as an existential condition. So the desert is a place that has a very special quality, in my opinion, which is illusion. And there's a series of optical illusions or special phenomena that take place in the desert. One of them is, for instance, Fata Morgana, which is an optical illusion that occurs. Probably most of you have experienced it at some point, because it's not only found in the desert, but wherever there's some air below the line of sight that is colder than the air above. And these cause a certain particular effect that blurs the contours and blurs the vision, so creating a completely distorted vision of reality. And this is a very fascinating phenomenon that other artists and writers and filmmakers have been interested in. For instance, Werner Herzog, who in 1971 made a film that was actually called Fata Morgana, that was specifically about this phenomenon. So we can move on. Yes. So I was interested in traveling in mostly the deserts in the West, so in California and Nevada, as opposed to Herzog, that, for instance, was more filming in the Sahara and Sahel Desert. Why was I interested in the Western deserts? We can move to the next slide. Is because these are places that are uninhabited by people that somehow have pushed their way more and more into the West until they reach their final stop. And next. This is also a place that somehow has changed very much its connotation in time, from being the so-called golden land and the land of milk and honey, and it was like a place of hope and expectations, is becoming more and more a sort of dystopian place. So like I said, a place where people go when they kind of reach final stop. We can move to the next slide. This is, for instance, a person I photographed who's the caretaker of a ghost town in Death Valley, which I thought it was in itself quite a telling thing to do, an interesting job to have. And I really like this portrait because if you cover half of his face or the other half, you have a completely different version of an impression of who this person is or how he could be. And the next image, yes, this image was shot in the Mojave Desert, and this bed belonged to John Samuelsson, who was a Swede, who in the 1920s decided to move to America and to become a homesteader, which many of you probably know. It means that you claim some land, you start working on this land, that at some point it becomes yours. But this never happened in the case of Samuelsson, because he was not an American citizen. So he was very angry about this situation, and what he did was writing and scribbling all around in these boulders that you see in the pictures, some sentences that are actually quite ironic as well, because often they have some misspellings that show his frustration and his opposition to the growing capitalism. For instance, one of those boulders says, "The milk of human kindness ain't got thick cream on it for all of us. Ask Hoover." So that is why I really thought it was interesting to travel around this place. And if we move to the next slide. Yes, I also wanted to say something about the choices for the installation. So the idea of the sand for this installation came to bring a sort of immersive quality to the piece, and also as a hint to the context where the images were found, which is, like I said, the desert. As I mentioned earlier, there are certain optical illusions and a sort of alternation between glow and opaque that I find are a fundamental aspect of the nature of the desert. Therefore, when I was working at the installation, I was trying to recreate how the light is either reflected, we can move to the next slide, or absorbed by the surfaces of the objects. And so therefore mounting these pictures on aluminum plates that they're stuck in the sand and facing different direction, I was trying to give a hint of this feeling that you have when you're in the desert. My goal was also to create an organic installation that would change according to the natural light. So for instance, here you can see in different moments of the days, the sand also changes color. So if you visit the exhibition on a sunny day or on a cloudy day, you have a kind of different perception of it. And last, so this way the exhibition would kind of follow the natural cycles of light, and it would change based on how the light comes out also from the gallery windows, as you can see in one of the first images where there was this the main installation shots. Yeah,
thank you, Giulia. Amazing. It was really, really interesting. Maybe there is time for kind of just a quick question, because you speak a lot about desert, and there is also like, to me, it's really interesting that the desert itself is connected also to words like desertification and words that became really, really prominent during the post-war period, where the desert almost also became a place to colonize. So when you refer, for instance, to John Samuelson, I think there are a lot of links there that colonization happens in many ways, both from a national perspective, but in this case also from or I don't know, maybe I'm just more curious to know like the position of this person of which is more migratory than so it's in an object, or it's not the subject or the perpetrator of that position. So maybe it's interesting to hear a little bit more from you.
Yeah, I think I was not really interested in telling the specific story of John Samuelson, but of course, when I describe the pictures, I tend to tell this story because I think it's interesting. Well, I would say that like the overall feeling of the whole water stilling, and there's a sort of tension, and there's a sort of I think it's an exhibition that gathers and put together all our personal worries in this specific historical moment. And it's kind of ironic, I would say, that an exhibition that is themed around all of this has an end and is forced to close because of this ominous and eerie and global threat, which is this virus. So I thought it was kind of ironic what happened in general.
Yeah, maybe we can also like come back to your work afterwards, because it's true that there are a lot of parallels between your work and unexpected parallels as well, and the work of Hedevig, for instance, which is also about cartography, and it gives also another dimension to what the word desert and desertification in that respect means. But maybe I can call in Yamile now, because speaking about migration, your work really touches upon the human movement that has come to an halt in the past few weeks, because we are not necessarily used to experience airports as we were before. And maybe you can just quickly introduce your work, because immediately after this installation where you enter into this sand space, you encounter this movie in this dark cube. So maybe Yamile, you can quickly introduce your work, and we can start from there.
Okay, Antonio, thank you very much. Hi, everybody. Yes, this is a video, and the name is Accidentally I Got GoPro, and it is videos only started by that. I got a GoPro camera that my husband bought to make skateboard videos, and he never did anything. And then I found the camera and said, well, maybe I can use it. I can be doing something interesting. And then I started to traveling with the camera and using the camera in airports. And then I'm learning how to use the camera, because even though that is a very simple device, they don't have a screen, and it's kind of difficult to put in the settings, you know, and you don't know what you are doing. So I started to like it, the little cube, and I started to using around, and then coming home, and there was like the developing a film, coming and seeing the computer what I was recording, and I love it. So I started to doing like going just in the airports and start recording and putting this in a folder in the computer, and putting all the material in a folder. And then I started to look in the material and love it and like it. And then I saw things that they were bad done, and they having a potential to be doing better. So when I back in the airport, I was trying to do, and I learning more and more and more how to film it. So I decided to make the film. So I invited Edward to join me in this project. So we put an editing and making the sound and everything together. And then the ending of the film is about the airports as a place, but at the same time they have like a small stories that they are our real stories about traveling, and then are about migration. Those stories, what happened when you change from one place to other place. So the act of traveling is what I think so is very interesting with the video.
So maybe people got a chance to see your work right before we started, because you made it available and we provided a link. So I really hope that people may have gotten the chance of seeing the piece, and maybe they will also have questions afterwards. But I think that one of the heaviest kind of, or one of the lack of movement that we feel in this moment is certainly like something which is perpetrated both in the cities that have become somehow desert, but also the airports, which were the quintessential somehow hotspot of capitalist-driven economy. So in this sense, airports have completely shifted what they, overnight they have completely shifted what they were supposed to represent. So I'm very curious also to understand, and maybe for everyone also to get from you, Yamile, like how do you see your work in the aftermath of what's happening, because what happened, because maybe you can tell us a little bit about that, because it was a very meditative kind of piece, and it was supposed to be a piece also that reflected on that voids of that, or that pauses that you find in the airport, and a space also where you were able to think in between some sort of movements. But I'm very curious to understand your take now, where that seems to be the past for the moment.
Yeah, well, I think so that when we were speaking about the airports are connecting or related to migration, no? So, for example, one of the texts of the video is about a terror attack in New York when the Twin Towers were down. So then immediately the security in airports changed. There was immediately, and they have changed it for forever. So there was an immediately repercussion in insecurity around the world and in traveling. They changed the way that we used to travel, you know, and still all those rules still now valid when we are crossing the security things. But at the same time, with the thing that happen right now, again, it's a problem of migration, and they have this immediately repercussion in airports, and then it's kind of interesting the whole phenomena. For example, I was traveling the last time, the 15th of March, so it was the last time in an airport. And then the feeling of the airport was totally different, and the control of coming into Norway, there were soldiers asking you for your passport, looking if you were Norwegian or you were not Norwegian, or you were residents or not residents, and not letting you coming into the country if you were not Norwegian. And there was a kind of a feeling of fear in the airport, like people feeling like the airport was a hospital, or a place that you, or more than a hospital, like someone sick that you don't want to touch because you get sick, you get contagious. So then I was like fascinated, because airports always have been like places that have a kind of a happiness and excitement, because people is coming to a new place, is going in holidays, and people are like eating or drinking or buying things in the tax-free. This time everybody will sit down with masks and looking around like, I don't want to be contagious, I don't want to that the virus doesn't come in, which is very interesting, that feeling in the airport. And then there was as well interesting to see that the virus has been traveling, and the virus has been the airport. So this pandemic maybe has been before virus and illness traveling from A to B, but this time is faster, because we can traveling faster than before, and as well is a lot of here in Europe, because people can afford to travel. So it's a sign of wealthy countries that people can move constantly from A to B. And for instance, Norway is one of the most wealthy countries, and people have money to travel. So then the virus is traveling too from A to B.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you're saying that the planes are like kind of the transmitters somehow, or that's what you're hinting at, that the planes are also like the movement, and they represent fear. But what's interesting also in relation maybe to your work, it's I was rereading Robert Smithson towards the development of an air site this morning, and he was exactly claiming that with the consumerist airlines, for instance, we don't think anymore about the airplanes and around airports do not represent speed anymore, but they represent staticness. And there is something that is very present in your work from before, the fact that you don't necessarily represent the speed that those places embody, but something else, which is like the static aspect of it. Maybe you can say something about that. I think it's
Yeah, the static is because they have a speed, but they have as well a kind of stillness, and it's that time that you spend them waiting. You have to wait in 2 hours, 3 hours, and sit down there, and so then is the observation time, the time that I use it to observe and to record and to giving that kind of looking the place as is in a different way. But at the same time, of course, one of the things that happens that we were traveling a lot, moving planes. I don't know how many. If you just see, there was like 7, 8 flights from Oslo to Copenhagen every day. And maybe 7 flights from Oslo to Bergen, and maybe other 8 from Trondheim, Stavanger. You know, that movement now is not flights, because they are stopping the virus to travel. So it's not just us, but they don't want to spread the thing. So the scene is kind of now, I was wondering how it looks in this moment, the airport. I wanted to go in and see how it looks now. There must be kind of a Chris Martin, a kind of a science fiction film.
Yeah. Maybe we can stop there and come back to your work later, because I think there are a lot of other interesting aspects that we could explore, and we can pass to Tobias, because somehow like these scars that are left behind, like scars in terms of glitch left by visual machines and by machines themselves, is something that comes with your work. So maybe Tobias, you can introduce yourself and maybe also start to describe the work in its absence.
Hi everyone, thanks for listening. And thank you, Fotogalleriet, for arranging this. I think it's really nice that you do this to sort of show the exhibition, even though the gallery had to close down. My name is Tobias. I'm talking with you from my studio at Rake Arbeidsfellesskap in Trondheim. I'm sitting in the editing room. I'm an artist working primarily with video and photography, and super happy to be part of this year's Vårutstillingen. So if we could go to the first image. So the works I'm showing are two images titled Ultimatule and The Great Wave after Hokusai. And they are part of a series of images revolving around similar themes. I thought that said something about the physical appearance, since we're doing this online. Ultimatule is an image of 100 times 100 centimeters without the frame. And go to the next image, Håkon. The motif is a sort of graphical composition of squares in different grade scales. Together, these squares form an oval shape. The image is a high-resolution reproduction, pixel by pixel, of one of the navigation images from the NASA space probe New Horizons. It is shown together with a short text on the wall that you can see on the side there, that reads as follows. And I quote, "In December 2018, the NASA space probe New Horizons reached Arrokoth, an object in the Kuiper belt previously known as Ultimatule. From there, it sent this image showing Arrokoth in 12 times 12 pixels. The image is a technical navigation image, meaning it was used to guide the probe. When the image was taken, it set a new record as the image taken farthest away from Earth." End of quote. On the other hand, the Great Wave after Hokusai looks, if you can go to the next image, Håkon. The next image, the Great Wave after Hokusai, looks like a classic landscape image, at least from a distance. It measures 120 times 65 centimeters. And when you get closer to it, you can see that it's quite pixelated and that many of the colors are a bit off. For example, the sea is very dark. And the basis for this work is an image retrieved from a 3D model in Google Earth, taken from approximately the same perspective and location as the iconic image, The Great Wave of Kanagawa by Katsushika Hokusai. The work is also shown together with a short text on the wall that reads as follows, and I quote, "Screenshot from Google Earth," end of quote. So to say something about the background of these images, they're grounded in an interest in the correlation between human vision and the camera. For some time, I've worked with looking at differences and similarities between human vision and the camera and how they are used to describe each other. Specifically, I've been doing this by looking at the perspective of the stranger, like a visitor or a tourist. In the image series shown at Fotogalleriet, I've focused on machine vision. And of course, the camera is in itself a machine, but with machine vision, I mean specific type of operative images that are used to, as a part of a variety of production processes and machine operations. So these images can be everything from the laser measurements a robot makes before plastic wrapping a finished product to the images processed by the Tesla autopilot. There are different ways of representing the world visually in a way that makes it possible for the specific machine to perform a specific task. Now, I'm quite interested in the technical means of image production and the influence that production techniques have on the stories that images tell. For me, working with this image series has been a way of looking into how computer-generated image interpretation relates to human interpretation of images. So the image interpretation made by a space probe obviously isn't disconnected from human influence, since the operation and task of the probe is programmed by humans. However, the technology provided by any imaging technique, be it Japanese woodblock printing or the imaging techniques of a space probe, provides a frame of production possibilities. In the same way, the original Hokusai print could not have been produced using Google Earth as a tool. So I want to say something on the techniques that I allude to in this series. The two works have in common that they are both images from inaccessible worlds. One is outer space, which is only available if you are backed by one of the several spaceflight organizations. The other is a virtual world, which is Google Earth. This might be a world that is easier to enter, as anyone can do it, as long as you use Google's own web browser. But it's a proprietary world owned by Google in its entirety. Where space is owned by no one, Google Earth is a world built with copyrighted images. And taking a screenshot in it is the closest you'll get to taking a photograph. When Google constructs Google Earth, they use a combination of satellite images and photographs from cameras mounted on the underside of airplanes. All images in Google Earth are taken during spring, all over Earth. This has practical reasons, but also coincided kind of nicely with this work being shown at the spring exhibition. In parts of the world that are shown as a 2D representation, like the sea and the boat on the image shown at Vårutställningen that you can see here now, the satellite images are used. And in the case with 3D renders, like the volcano Mount Fitje that you see in the background of the image, they use images from cameras mounted on airplanes. These planes are flown in circles around the sites intended to be built into a 3D render so that there are images of every building and object from multiple angles. Afterwards, an algorithm uses time and location data to puzzle together the images to something that looks like a 3D render. Walls of houses are warped into place and trees are built with a special tree algorithm. Algorithms also automatically erases any human capture on the images. This basically makes Google Earth a complex composite image or a mesh of singular images placed in such a way that they resemble a three-dimensional representation. On the other hand, the image that inspired me to make Ultima Thule is a very simple one. If you can go back, yeah, welcome to the previous. 13 times 13 pixels taken from a very long distance, depicting the space rock Arrokoth that was previously known as Ultima Thule. Now, the change of name of this space rock is kind of interesting in itself, and one could go much deeper into the politics of naming space rocks. But basically what happened was that the Latin name Ultima Thule, meaning something like the final frontier, has connections with Nazi occultism. So the name was therefore changed to Arrokoth. Arrokoth is a name borrowed from an extinct language, Powhatan, of the indigenous Algonquin people of the United States. And it means something like sky or cloud. So this cluster of technical and linguistic information adds up to a kind of production background, which is that I wanted to say something about machine intention with this series. I wanted to work with images that, even though they are not photographs, can function as heirs to photographs. And I've had these dreams for many years to make a sci-fi movie. And instead, I started working on this image series where I want to propose a potential for these respective images or these respective machines, the probe and the Google servers and algorithms, of being sentient objects in a way. And not because they think or have feelings, but because they process images. I've always been interested in thinking of the camera as a protagonist in the images it produces, be it video or photographs. And in this case, I wanted to take that a step further and propose a kind of subtle sci-fi fantasy that might be either dystopian or utopian. That is, what if the first sentient machine is not achieved by translating human thought into conscious circuits, but rather by outdoing humans in the capacity of visual processing. Yeah, so that's what I had to say for now.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's really fascinating also because I think that especially now where all these corporations and the tools that they have produced are really like taking over any kind of human management, or there is a governance of corporations that is totally unexplored against the national government, also because they have much less, they have to respond much less to the people because they're private corporations. I think this work really speaks about that, but also about leisure somehow. You said at some point something very interesting about the fact that Google Earth is done for people to explore, and it's really an instrument of leisure, so that also Google can acquire more and more information somehow. And also these cars that you can see in the images are something that actually helps them to gain even more data regarding to movement of goods and people. So in this specific moment, that acquires quite a scary scenario. Or yeah, it summarizes a lot of the fears that a lot of philosophers as well are trying to raise about this particular moment in time. But speaking about this space of leisure, maybe I'm going to pass the word. I'm just like checking that I'm following the, yes, to Tor-Finn, so that he can speak about another amazing work in the exhibition that somehow touches upon these issues in a different kind of way, but also like speaking about a shift in our society, which is like, yeah, very present in from his perspective. So maybe Tor-Finn, you can just like introduce yourself and also like start to speak a little bit about your work, and then we will see if we can take answers after or at the end.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Antonio. That's very kind. You can just go to the first slide immediately here. So my name is Tor-Finn Malum Fitje, and before talking about my actual work, I'd just like to give you like a brief outline of my background in education. So I did as you can see, I did a bachelor in film production at the University of Bergen. Specializing in directing, and then I went to the photography department at the Art Academy, where I started BFA, which I finished in at Konstfack in Stockholm, and then I did my master's at the Royal Institute in Stockholm, graduating in 2016. And so throughout my education and beyond, really, I've been engaging in different forms of essayistic filmmaking, also narrative sound works and sound installations, trying to construct like intricate narratives, I would say, exploring different topics, and particularly how these topics are kind of changed or remodulated when they're represented online. So I just wanted to give a few examples of these topics real quickly. If you can go to the next slide. I did a film on the history of the sound recording called PHONAUTOGRAPH. And after that, next please, I did a narrative sound piece on the metaphors of physics, which I also wrote my master thesis on. Then I explored ornithology and the mystery of bird navigation before moving on to a film on dark matter called ALEPH NULL and the Missing Mass, which is, all of these films are quite long. This is almost 2 hours duration, so it's not easily reduced to like one tagline, although I've tried to do so. This is about how darkness is perceived in Western culture throughout history, from the Middle Ages through the Renaissance on to today. I'm looking at darkness in painting, in psychology, and in the natural sciences, and also in like black metal music, the black goo conspiracy theory online, which you can see an image from here. Yes, you can move on. Then I did a film together with Thomas Anthony Hill, who I'm still collaborating with, called Hyphenic, in which we created this fictional language called Hyphenic that has its own grammar and a syntax. And these signs that you can see, they appear allegedly in household mold. And so we got different bloggers and YouTubers to create material about this language, trying to construct our own conspiracy theory online. And all of these films are, yes, you can go to this frame. All of these films that I've been doing are rather nuanced, I would say, in the sense that they try to explore these topics very broadly. I've been trying to give as much attention to the more of the like empirical or academic arguments as the more mythical or spiritual or maybe even conspiratory ways of looking at reality, trying to take these different aspects seriously and also making fun of them. And so when no, please stay at the last frame. So when Thomas and I decided to start a new project together, we wanted to turn this on its head completely. We wanted to create a universe where there were no nuances whatsoever. So we started writing these stories that in a world where there is no uncertainty, no doubt exists anymore. And so Ad Nauseam consists of 9 films, 7 of which we exhibit at the spring exhibition, and they tackle various topics or debates from society today, like high and low, really, everything from neuroscience to savory ice creams. It's kind of like a way of flatten out the importance between things, and all of these films have organizations within them, which you can see here. They have their own coat of arms, which is kind of like a symbol of how these things have reached like a status of being a real truth, like an emblem of truth in a way, like a flag or a logo. What we wanted to comment on, I would say, is what we call the modern paradigm of truth, which is the underlying notion that all truths today are equally valid, like all ways of looking at the world are true in a sense. And you can see this in news, how the personal truth has become so much more accepted. You see it in the natural sciences, where nothing is true in a sense. At least in physics, you can't say anything true about reality. And you see it in the visual arts, in contemporary art, because in a sense, all ways of looking at an artwork is equally true, just by virtue of being your own way of looking at it. And we're not necessarily saying that this is wrong, but we're saying it can be damaging mentally to people, because it creates a certain type of chaos, where there is no system of value, really. And so we wanted to turn that on its head, trying to be so specific and claim like the correct way of looking at everything. And if you please go to the next slide, just a few examples of these films. I don't have time to go in depth, but this one, The End of Kitchen Politics, is about kitchens. So obviously, we created these two groupings, like one group that claims that the kitchen should be this open, like a closed, isolated space devoted to its functionality. And the other group that you can see here, called the OKR, which is the Open Kitchen Radicals, that that claim that all rooms in a house should be there should be pure liberty. Everyone should be able to decide themselves, and there should be no boundaries, no walls, basically. And we come to a conclusion on what's the right way to look at a kitchen. Like, all of these films are stating like a valid answer to these things. Next, please. The Last Rules of Football is about the VAR, which is the video assistant referee, that has been introduced in football the last 2 years, and how much chaos that has created, because the idea is to make a technology that can make it so that all of the decisions in football are clear and obvious. That's their tagline, actually. And so we've rewritten the rules of football and come to a conclusion that everyone can agree on. And the next slide, please. The FAITHEIST Church is the centerpiece of the installation. You can see an image from the installation at Fotogalleriet. It has a large screen and 6 headphones, and it's the longest one, 1 hour duration almost. And this narrative traces like a global event in world religion, where atheism, or neo-atheism rather, have merged with Christianity to create this new religion called the FAITHEIST Church. And we go through different like religious denomination to get there. We've created, I think, around maybe 10 fictional religions in this film that we created, that all have their own coat of arms. And it's a bit of a paradox, really, because the FAITHEIST Church has a tagline that is, you should always keep doubting yourself, just to give yourself something to do. And they claim that the Old Testament God is in fact the first atheist, because he's or she or it doubts itself all of the time, its own creation. And so we figured it's a nice way, a nice paradox actually, to round off the project, because it's reaching like a complete certainty, doubtlessness, in the way that by realizing that you should always doubt yourself and keep doubting all your decisions throughout your life. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thanks. It's really amazing, and I forgot, of course, to say before that Tor-Finn has made his films available as well. So you have the links on the Fotogalleriet website and also on Facebook. If you haven't watched them before, I think you still have an opportunity because Tor-Finn has made them available for longer time. So just it's quite an experience, I have to say. So please take the time and just like browse through those films because you will for sure not regret it. And I wanted to pass the word to Hedevig, and it's very interesting also when you go into the exhibition, of course, you will find yourself in front of Tobias' work, and then you could go straight in and into Tor-Finn installation. But there is also some sort of experience that you can only have physically in the space, because I think there are a lot of reverberation as well, or reverberations as well between the works, and something perhaps also very strong, which is about found footage, which somehow you can also say or claim, or this is maybe my claim, that also Tobias' work works with, in this case, with found footage. And this is something that comes also in the work of Hedevig. And maybe Hedevig, so du vil snakke norsk. So we will hear a little bit of Norwegian, and I'll try to summarize at the end for our international followers.
Ja, jeg tenkte å snakke norsk bare for variasjonens skyld, men også fordi at dette ligger nær meg, og da norsk lettest å bruke. Jeg har jobbet med fotografi i cirka 20 år, og veldig takknemlig for å være med på vårutstillingen. Det min debut på fotogalleriet, så det veldig hyggelig. Og ekstra morsomt at jeg har med bilder som jeg ikke har tatt selv. Det også en helt ny sjanger for meg å jobbe med arkivmateriale. Men disse bildene snakket til meg på en helt spesiell måte da jeg fant det, og det skal jeg fortelle litt om. Du kan gå til det oversiktsbildet. Ja, dette her bildene slik de montert på fotogalleriet. Det bestefaren min, han heter Peter Martin Anker, og han har tatt disse bildene. Da vi ryddet opp etter mine besteforeldre, så var det jeg som fikk en brødpose med en hel haug med usorterte negativer og kontaktkopier etter han. Og den har jeg latt ligge i ganske mange år, inntil 2018, hvor jeg gikk gjennom alt som lå der og forsøkte å finne ut av noen av de bildene. Bestefar var diplomat og jurist, og jeg reiste enormt mye gjennom sitt arbeid. Og på 30-tallet, da han var selv i 30-årene, så jobbet han i Folkeforbundet. De holdt til i Genève, og Folkeforbundet ble opprettet etter første verdenskrig for å opprettholde en slags global fred. Det var forløperen til FN som ble startet rett etter andre verdenskrig. En av de oppgavene som han hadde i Folkeforbundet var å overvåke en kartlegging som ble gjort i Palestina i 1938. Og jeg kan gå litt mer inn på det etter hvert, men hvis du går til det neste bildet, så ser du på den lille konvolutten som jeg da fant i dette arkivet. Det veldig mye i det arkivet som ikke har noen referanser. Det helt umulig å spore hvor og når bildene tatt. Men akkurat denne konvolutten var veldig konkret, fordi det står flyturene over Palestina juni 1938. Der 6., 13. og 27. juni 1938. Og da jeg åpnet konvolutten, så lå det en kontaktkopi og 20 små 4x6 negativer. det var nesten ikke mulig å se hva som var på de, fordi de så undereksponert eller overeksponert, og veldig uskarpe. Så jeg tror at han ikke har brukt disse noen gang. Jeg tror han har bare latt de ligge, fordi at de har nok ligget i den konvolutten da i 80 år. Bortsett fra et bilde, hvis du går til det neste fotografiet nå. Dette bildet her det heter Taborfjellet, og det ligger øst for Nazaret. Det det eneste av disse bildene som gjenkjennelige. Ingen av de andre bildene mulig å spore hvor tatt. Jeg har forhørt meg med litt forskjellige journalister og kjentfolk som har, for jeg ble jo veldig nysgjerrig på det, om dette lot seg gjøre å se igjen landskapet. Men denne tiden helt radert ut. Og jeg synes jo det ganske interessant i forhold til hva et fotografi kan gjøre og ikke kan gjøre. Og at den tiden, altså at de 80 årene som da mellom bildene ble tatt og nå, det på en måte, altså det bare den forestillingen vi har om hvordan historien har utspilt seg i Palestina siden den gangen. Det det som på en måte disse bildene vekker for meg, i hvert fall et sånt slags poetisk og veldig sårt blikk på et landskap og en verden som ikke lenger finnes. Og det som interessant med akkurat 1938 var at fordi da hadde det vært en gradvis innvandring til Palestina av jøder helt siden 1880-årene, men på grunn av nazismen så økte jo den enormt i 30-årene. Og kom til et punkt hvor palestinerne begynte å protestere, og de syntes det ble for mange jøder. Og man hadde de første konfliktene. Fra 37 cirka så var det en del sammenstøt mellom jøder og muslimer. Og så ble dette her, da var det egentlig det var et sånt mandatstyre under England, så det var egentlig i praksis en britisk koloni. Og britene de satte seg for å finne en fredelig løsning mellom israelerne og palestinerne. Og et av forslagene var å gjøre en deling, dele landet mellom de to folkeslagene, men det ble nedstemt. Man mente at det ville bare føre til mer konflikt. Så i 39 så ble det på en måte avlyst et sånt forslag. Men det lå der, altså grenseoppgangene som de hadde tenkt, de lå der. Så når den andre verdenskrigen var over, så kunne israelerne si dette disse grensene vi vil ha. Og så kuppet de nærmest landet. Og så kan jo vi historien slik den utspilte seg etter andre verdenskrig. Men for meg disse bildene det første gang jeg har en slags emosjonell opplevelse av hva den brutaliteten, dette bitte lille landskapet, det ikke større enn Innlandet. Det et veldig lite land. Og det tenker man ikke på, for konflikten så stor. Men disse bildene får meg til å tenke på hvor kort den historien Altså, hvis man tar de samme bildene, hvis man tar landskapsbilder av Norge, så vil man gjenkjenne spor. Det mange ting i Norge som gjør at du kan gjenkjenne et landskap fra 80 år tilbake. Mens her det helt utradert. Jeg synes for eksempel dette bildet her enormt vakkert, fordi det viser et sånt landskap fra en antikk sivilisasjon, et veldig sånn typisk mønster på hvordan man organiserte en liten landsby med så rette og ordentlige linjer, og så hadde de felles landbruk rundt landsbyen. Du kan gå til neste bilde. Dette er en by. Kan ikke si hvilken by det er. Men her kan du se liksom hvordan han har sittet i flyet, og så har han knipset på en måte etter hvert som flyet har beveget seg. Hvis du går da på neste bilde igjen, så er det et nærbilde av de to forrige. Og der ser man på begge to, på det til høyre så ser du et spor av fingeravtrykk, og det er vel kanskje antageligvis bestefars finger da. Og så i det til venstre så er det noen små linjer oppi himmelen som på en måte gjentar linjene i byen, men som er da skraper og riper i negativet. Så her er det liksom en egen historie som ligger i negativet, som handler om at materialiteten i negativet forteller sin egen historie om dette landskapet. Så det fascinerer meg spesielt med disse bildene. Og så kan du gå til det siste bildet, og der er det på en måte helt uklart hva vi ser. Det er en kystlinje, og så er det en hvit stripe som skyter inn fra høyre side, og man vet ikke om er det en speiling i flyet, er det en stripe på havet, eller er det noe som ligger i eksponeringen. Det er liksom helt åpent hvor disse linjene og stripene kommer fra, og hvor de hører hjemme. Om det er fra der hvor bildet er tatt, eller om det er i negativ, eller om det er i landskapet. Så det var kanskje det jeg hadde å si foreløpig. Hvis jeg vet ikke om du har noen spørsmål, Antonio?
I think that we have, you have just like, I'll just try to summarize very quickly, although like it's...
Du kan gå tilbake til utgangspunktet, til det bilde nummer 1, så ser du den hele der.
Because you said that you've worked for 20 years with photography, and this is the first work that you have done with archive. I mean, they are like super fascinating images because, as you say, they speak about cartography, they speak about your father, your grandfather, who was like working for the UN in the 1930s. And as we can see in the little envelope that actually it's in the exhibition space, by that little envelope, there is written that these images are flying over Palestine. And also like we have the location also of Zurich and Switzerland, because that's where the UN were based. And some of those images are under or overexposed or out of focus. And this was also part of your interest in this. And because you have done a lot of research also to try to understand with many specialists both in Norway and abroad, if they could actually recognize the physical corresponding place, but the only one place that could be recognized is the Tabor mountain. Mm. And it's what photography can do and not do. These images are somehow also poetic for you, for what happened afterwards, because they were, yes, part of attempting a cartography of the place, because at the time this was a British colony, and you can already see here how the land would have been divided afterwards. And so these images already show that sort of brutality of the great, of a small land with the greatest conflict, which is a very interesting way of putting that. And it also shows how short history is. And you said something about if you would compare this to Norway, you would also understand like how any kind of land may become a place of conflict at any time. And this is the most ancient civilization. And it's also like super interesting that you said that, you know, like sometimes you can't even understand what these images are really like trying to say or represent, especially in the last one, because it's unclear what we are actually asked to see. because even the city that is in focus, which city is in focus, and why this image was even taken. And maybe what interests you in all of these images is also the materiality of history, because these images bring with themselves a history of their own, and therefore all the scratches that, of course, we can see in these images, in these digital images, but we really hope that you will be able to see them in the space or on a different occasion, is that in printing these images, of course, you can see all those mistakes that belong to the negative themselves, that are the scratches, the fingerprint of your grandfather, and all of that bring that unique history, and also like that violence of history somehow. I think that there are a lot of parallels. We can go back to Hedevig, and maybe we can do a question afterwards, because I think that this issue of cartography as well is something that comes back somehow. It's interesting that in your work, it's something that belongs somehow to the very beginning of the aerial view, and therefore, you know, like it somehow also contextualized this kind of super Western perspective on things, and how like a flight as well was used as a mean of making those spaces like really mappable, so that they could become humanly controlled. And I think that's also something that is very, very present in those images. So maybe we can come back to that later, unless you want to say something now about that specific thing.
No, we can. There are many parallels. We can look to them later.
Yeah, amazing. And we passed from Hedevig to Tanya, because I think it's also very, very important that, you know, like this kind of control that goes from the outside, and this aerial view, this need of the image for scientific purposes, for military purposes, like in this case, that it's in between an amateur, because also that I think I remember from some conversation, Hedevig, that you mentioned that it is a little bit unclear, this amateur dimension of your grandfather with the specialist dimension, and those images really serving a purpose. So maybe there is also an artistic kind of gesture in there that like kind of boycotts the military, or the more that is behind surveillance, or like or grasping an overall territory, or a piece of land, or a land, or such as Palestine, which comes to go into the interior and the inside of the body with the work of Tanya Busse. So maybe Tanya, it's a good moment for you to come in and present your work.
Yeah, thanks very much for for everyone being here. It's nice to follow up on the exhibition and discuss like what these images are about. So thank you for hosting this. My name is Tanya Busse, and I'm a visual artist, working mostly with moving images and installation, and also photography. And my practice often combines nature or contested landscapes with a post-human kind of presence, industrial presence. And I'm interested in deep time, invisible architecture, and also how power is articulated through materials, through relationships, and through geographies. So today I'm in my studio in Tromsø, you can see. I'm originally from Canada, the east coast of Canada, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia area, but I've been living in Norway since 2012. I came here to do my master's degree at the academy in Tromsø. And I would say that living here has really informed my work a lot, especially in the space where the local meets global flows. So the area where I live is, it's really a perforated landscape, you know, there are holes that dot the maps of northern Norway, of future extractive sites, for example, and prospective ones. It's also many other things, you know. It's a land for calving grounds, for migratory routes on land and on sea, or in the sea, of oil platforms, military bases, radar stations, testing sites. So I think there's a lot of dark activity that's happening under the surface. And I think that that sort of suggests the need for possible futures that are counter to the ones that the apocalyptic extractivist situation that we're in is leading us to. So this is like sort of where I locate my practice. I try to explore sort of like alternatives to, say, the military industrial complex, to the extractive industry, and also larger colonial narratives, often from a personal and subjective point of view, which leads me to this work called Blood, Sweat and Tears. That's part of Voretstilling now. And it's made up of 3 images, although I have many more, but I selected these 3. And it's actually fluid samples or specimens that were taken from me and then blown up 6,000 times the original size through an electron microscope to reveal their like ultrastructure, basically. And usually in previous works, as I mentioned, I often like focus on the industrial exploitation of nature, but for this series I tried to turn the gaze inwards towards the material consequences of kind of like our lives and our labors, blood, sweat and tears. And those are all traces of like work and love and life lived. So in a process I call it like intraction instead of extraction. I tried to move from the outer world of extraction to the inner world where the body itself becomes a mine. So the process was basically that last year I approached a microbiology lab here in Tromsø at the university. And I tried to locate an electron microscope because of their extremely high resolution imagery. And usually electron microscopes are used for like biomedical or even agricultural research purposes. And they work sort of differently than a typical light microscope. But they can magnify an object up to 10 million times. So for example, you can peer into like a fly's eye or extremely small microscopic specimens. And through a friend, I was able to gain access to this lab. And I worked with a lab technician. She's also a microbiologist to somehow, I would say, reveal the sort of inner workings of the body. And although this like process was sort of different, had a different intention than what she's used to. Her name is Randi Olsen. We definitely sort of our interests connected when it comes to optics. And yeah, I would say I'm very interested in how we read the landscape and our built environment and how we translate what we see through visual representations. So this includes like optical technologies that are used to read and measure and survey the contemporary landscape that we were just talking about, you know, topographies and cartographies, and but which are also used in like infrastructure and in architecture and various industries. I think it's particularly interesting to look at these tools of measuring when it comes to being able to reveal the invisible. Because in a way, optics become like a prosthetic for the human eye, so that we're able to see, you know, to extend the human's vision. And in the past, I've worked with like drones and remote sensing and point cloud, like 3D scanning. And this time I chose to work with a very microscopic tool. And the reason why I did this is also to try and question the cultural and the political frame that builds our gaze and also our understanding of the world, you know. And yeah, so these images are sort of a play with scale and perspective. Yeah, you don't really know if they're a landscape or an outwardly landscape or an inwardly landscape. And I like that these boundaries and thresholds are ambivalent. And I think that there's something about, you know, the world of drone photography and remote sensing and satellites that offer this like very hardened, what they call objective, which is completely not objective, or scientific view over the land and territory. And I'm trying to counteract that with these images to sort of emphasize the materiality of our bodies and also like the substances that make us human. Yeah, so I guess.
Yeah, so it's really, again, I think it's a kind of scary, and I don't want to be to put too much emphasis on this, but I think it's really like kind of important how this exhibition somehow foresees something which which has happened all of a sudden and really affected all of our imaginaries, and therefore also those artworks which were produced as a speculation, as an investigation, as a research, as looking inwards towards these technologies because of what has happened in the past few weeks in our specific context, for instance, here in Oslo or in Norway. These images that you have produced, Tanya, they really like made me think a lot about how about the image, for instance, of the coronavirus, and something that the need also for people to get attached to one image in order to represent what's going on the inside. So, you know, like when I was like, when you look at these images that are constantly circulating now of this like very colored kind of virus, I always think back, because I think one of the questions that I asked you in the first place when we were in the exhibition space at the opening was, did you decide to have these images in black and white, for instance, or a very stupid question, or could you have had them in color? And you answer at the time to me that this is their original color. And so it also made me question the image of the coronavirus. So I just like want to hear a little bit from you, your kind of perspective in the aftermath of what has happened and how you look back also at this work.
Yeah, I guess there are certain formal decisions that were made in these images. One is that they're black and white because electron microscopes, either transmission microscopes or scanning microscopes, they only give you an image that's black and white. They're not able technically to give you a spectrum of color. That's why although it's very tempting to add some color to them or tone, I decided to leave them true to their original scan. And also size-wise, I made them just big enough so that you can see a lot of the details that are there, because it's full of details and it's super high res. So it's a little bit of a shame to have them really small, you know. But I think it's very interesting that you bring up the image of coronavirus, because interestingly enough, I was reading a little bit about this, you know, the image that is circulating, which is like this red, black and white and red blob, which is actually an image created by a lady named Alessa Eckhart for the Center for Disease and Control. And she was asked in January to create an image of the coronavirus. And from what I understand, it's like, it's an illustration. It's like a medicinal illustration. And she's an illustrator, working a lot with medicine illustrations for different viruses and diseases. And as I understand it, it's like the image is actually taken, it's of a protein, and it's taken from a data bank, a protein data bank, which you can click on, and it's like open source. And it's used for students and researchers to be able to use that data for like 3D programming, for different 3D programs. And so that image, as I understand it, was taken from this data bank. It was sculpted, something that you can like, that you would want to viscerally touch, or maybe not, you know, but to make it really textured, as well as add a color that is alarming. So in fact, I think that perhaps there's like deeper reasons why red was chosen, but it's sort of like a color of an emergency, of transmission, you know, and that it was chosen quite arbitrarily. Yeah, and I think it's also very fascinating that this image is like the beauty shot, you know, it's like the one image that circulated and given like an identity or a brand to the virus.
Yeah, I think we can come back to that because there is also some questions for you. It's already 4:30, and I think we should keep it to the 2 hours that we have. So there are some questions from the audience that I'll go through them one by one, and I'll give to those questions priority so that we can hopefully close right before 5, as we have promised everyone. And also, like, maybe if you have questions for each other, meanwhile, I think it would be also interesting to open up the conversation intersectionally on the other side with everyone present. So the first one, and I also should ask everyone to be brief so that we get through all the questions that we have. So the first one is for Giulia, and does the title Close Encounters mean something specifically, or did you come about choosing that specific title for your series and works?
Yes, I mean, the title has a meaning, and in general, let's say I wanted to go on this journey around the desert, and my intention was to photograph what I would encounter, whether it was people or things that caught my attention. So there was literally that. But because I think my way of photographing is somehow, the aesthetics of my images are somehow deeply indebted to fiction, both movies and literature. Of course, I guess this title hints to something else, and of course it could be a reference to the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which is a sci-fi movie, and somehow I wanted to play with this reference and have it as a kind of sci-fi flavor in the back of your mind. So the title is kind of open-ended, and it's just a play on the title of the movie.
Yeah. Yamile, why did you choose the airport as the subject for your exploration? And is there any other locations, venues you wish to examine in the same way? We can't hear you. We can't hear you.
I have to unmute it. I forgot. Airports, because yeah, I got the camera and then I am in the airport waiting. So I started to recording and I find that the architecture was fascinated, very futuristic, so I just continued. And yes, I am trying to, and I started to working with the city as such with the same device. Yes, I'm working with the city, with the urban. So I love all these subways, trains, places. So I think so that yes, I continue recording. I am a new folder.
And did you have any difficulties filming at all these locations? And were there any locations that restricted filming?
Well, this is the thing that was amazing with that camera. I love it because I was filming in front of the people, like the security control in the airport. I can't imagine that it's not allowed to do it, but I put that cube in front of the man in a little thing that was there, and I just recorded and went in there, and then putting the camera in my pocket and continued and going through the thing. So that was amazing. Nobody stopped me. Nobody said I was not allowed to filming and anything. I just put the camera around every part and playing with the telephone. No, I put the camera then and making like I am doing something in the telephone, you know, like no stand up to the camera waiting that they record it and giving a couple of minutes to this ending. So that was quite handy. That's why I love it, that format. In an airport with other device I couldn't get. I have to ask him for permissions everywhere, so they couldn't take forever.
Yeah. This question is for Tobias. I have always wondered how you came across the images from New Horizons and what you thought was so interesting about those specifically compared to other satellite pictures.
I mean, I haven't really like followed many different satellites actually, but when this probe was approaching Arrokoth, it was quite widely reported in science magazines and on websites that I sometimes follow, and kind of being a probe that was pushing the limits of human exploration, or in this kind of like traditional adventurous sense, I was kind of fascinated. So I was following the reporting, and then when this first image came in, I thought I was really like taken aback because it was like, because of how visually stunning it was, and also how suggestive it was in a way. So, and of course this probe later took much more detailed images of this space rock and Pluto and so on. But I found this image to be the most interesting because of how visually appealing it was and how like suggestive it was in its abstraction.
And Tor-Finn, hvordan kommer dere på disse spesifikke konseptene rundt selve videoene? Er det noen dere generelt observerer i samfunnet, eller kommer det til dere på en annen måte? You can translate the question and maybe answer. Or how do you come towards this specific concept in these videos? Is there something in general that you observed in society, or it comes to you in a different way? You're muted. You're muted.
Okay, can you hear me now? Yeah.
Yes.
No, I'm not competent to answer how ideas come about, unfortunately. I wish I was, but no, it's but most of these things are things that I've been interested in for a long time, or they have some kind of relevance to my own life. Like I work with drawing kitchens as a part-time job, for instance, or I'm very interested in football and religion. So it's it comes from things of of like a genuine interest, I think.
And another question is, your work is incredibly fascinating. So I wonder, how much time do you spend making one video? Of course, depending on the length of it. Do you find the clips? How do you find the clips for the video?
Oh, okay. Well, the length, usually I used to make one video a year, but then they were a bit longer, obviously. So I've made all of these 9 videos in 1 year now, actually. Been busy. It's hard to tell because it can take the same amount to make like a 5 minutes video as a one that's 1 hour long. It's a long process. What was the other question? About where the clip comes from. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because that relates. I think there's a long process of trying to find material, and then I have this bank of material from previous projects that is kind of like an archive of stuff that I haven't been able to use. Also, there's a combination, you know. Before it was always like I kind of wrote the essays while I was looking for material, so it was much more like of a fluent process where it was back and forth with the text dependent on what kind of material I could find. But now recently with this project, it's been much more like we write the essays basically, and we make the films chronologically to the finished essays, and so it's more like illustrating the texts actually. So it's and that makes the process much quicker actually. So it takes less time when you have the text in place first, and then just illustrate it basically. But sorry, some of the material most of the material is found, and I would say maybe like 20% of it we get, like we order it, like the green screen material we order like specifically for the purpose for people to produce for us.
Mm-hmm. The next question is for Hedevig. Hedevig, fortalte bestefaren til Hedevig noen ganger om hans reiser til Midtøsten, eller om det arbeidet han gjorde som ga litt mer informasjon om fotografiene?
Altså, han døde da jeg var 7 år, men jeg husker, og han huskes som en som alltid snakket om Palestina-problemet. Han har også skrevet en bok og veldig, veldig mange artikler om hele Midtøsten og Palestina spesielt. Men han var ikke sånn som, han skrev ikke seg selv inn i de artiklene. Så akkurat hva han gjorde, altså hans rolle på den reisen som han hadde i juni i 1938, det kan bare på en måte finnes ut av hva Folkeforbundet sin oppgave var. Men nå skal det sies at han var alltid helt glassklar i sin holdning til opprettelsen av staten Israel. Og han advarte da, han jobbet jo da som Norges utsending som Norges representant i FN, da det ble opprettet i New York i 47. Og advarte FN mot å opprette staten Israel. Han sa det kommer til å bli en katastrofe, og det fikk han jo helt rett i. Og han snakket ikke om annet ever since, og han var også ambassadør til Libanon og Irak og Jordan og mange andre, og Egypt, mange andre land i Midtøsten. Så dette her var jo hans, på en måte, hans store prosjekt var å forstå Midtøsten og Palestina-problemet. Mm-hmm. Så sånn sett, ja, det lå hans hjerte veldig nær, og det på en måte skapte en holdning hos familien hans. Det var såpass mye at jeg lekte på en måte Palestina da jeg var liten. Så dette var liksom, dette har vært i hans holdning veldig dypt forankret hos meg, og også hos resten av familien. Og ja, jeg vet ikke om det svarer på det, men han altså, men det også på en måte et slags mysterium, fordi at altså hans rolle, han beskjeden I forhold til sin egen rolle.
Okay. Jeg prøver å oversette litt. So the question was if Hedevig ever knew why her grandfather or why he was in the Middle East, and or if she ever heard from him directly on the Middle East and the actual work that he was doing there, that related specifically to the photographs. And Hedevig is saying that she was only 7 when, unfortunately, her grandfather passed away, and but he always spoke on Palestine, and he wrote a book and many articles. But his role was, beside the fact that he was appointed by the UN and he was very present in the negotiations. There wasn't much else information except his mandate from the UN, and he had a very clear stand on the establishment of Israel as a state, and he would always say that this would have been a catastrophe. And but he was very much concerned in his entire life about the bigger, to understand the Middle East, the Middle Eastern problem. And so this was a great preoccupation that he had throughout his own life, and somehow this was very much grounded, therefore, in the rest of in you as a person, but also in the rest of the family. But there is a great mystery about those images somehow, because no one really knows more about them. There is another question for Tor-Finn, so we're going a little bit back. Could you explain a bit further how you select the imagery for the video works in the spring exhibition? From what I have seen, it seems to be a combination of sampling from YouTube, etc., and animations. How do you construct the visual narrative to accompany the essays, stories of the films?
Yeah, so it's obviously it's a combination. I guess I see it as found footage art still, which is what I've usually been identifying myself as, like a found footage filmmaker, I think. But this is much more animation, and there's much more as I told you before, there's much more material that I actually order now for people to do for me. So yeah, it's a fluent combination, I think. My idea has always been to try to represent or tell, say something about how things are represented online, and so it's quite natural to also use material online. These algorithms of YouTube that no one really understands, but that it has changed the way we view visual imagery in general. But I can't really say how I choose it, because that's sort of the intuition, really. There's so much stuff out there, and I'm overwhelmed by it, as most people are, and I've just tried to kind of like portray that overwhelming feeling, which is also refers back to the title of the piece, the nauseating, how it's too much of everything.
Thank you. Tanya, there is a question, or a couple of questions, or 3 questions for you. So you unmuted yourself, yes. Is there a specific reason why you choose to use your own blood, sweat, and tears and not someone else's?
Yes. I mean, the short version of that is that this series actually came out of a previous project where I was looking at iron mining around Kirkenes, Kirkenes bordering Russia, Norway, and Finnmark, Bjørnevatn mine. And I was looking at like the dumpings of the iron ore. And that's actually sort of what led me to this lab here in Tromsø. Because they often work with like medicine, but also agriculture. And they look also at like defects in basically environmental hazards and how they affect things on a microscopic level, local ecologies, etc. And so I was thinking actually of Blood, Sweat, and Tears sort of came out of a conversation I was having with a man at the mine. And, he was talking about the next generation and what is this like post-industrial generation going to do once the mine closes, and all of this labor and love that goes into it. So my original idea was actually to get samples from a teenager from Kirkenes to speak about sort of the future. But in fact, it felt a little bit constructed, and I've used my body in other projects. For example, removing my weight from a stone was a project called Chaloupe Reduced, and also using the body as like a prospective tool, so that we ourselves, if we're in water or for example, hydrotherapy, or if we're laying in water, we can actually, we're tools for prospecting because we're soaking up minerals as we do that. So I use my body in like different ways, I guess, sort of performative, and that just felt the most natural.
And the next question is connected to that, Tanya, because it says, is examining the body as closely as in this project something you could see yourself exploring further or in other ways?
Yes, but I think like this element of the human body and the earth body parallels. That's not so separate, and this boundary is permeable and penetrable. Often comes up in my work. I'm sure it will again.
And there is a third question, which is interesting because it has to do with size, which is something that I think it belongs, or it reflects on all the works, because all the works we can't experience them in their physical dimension, and those works by Tanya are also very big. So it's someone that has actually seen the exhibition and says, I had the opportunity once to work with some electron images, even in the possibilities to magnify a surface. Even the possibility of magnifying a surface is huge. The image this machine produces are very small in terms of resolution. How have you done to enlarge so much the printing pieces hanging in the exhibition? And this is the reason why the printed pieces have some lines, like if photographies were composed by more images.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, its capabilities to like zoom is incredible. But on the other hand, the resolution is fixed at 72. So when I was working with a lab technician, that was like one thing that we couldn't change. But we could change the length of time a scan would run or the pixels. So, I mean, these were, I guess, 8600 by 6100, 6100 pixels, about 30 megabytes. So it's possible to print them that large. I had this discussion with the lab technician asking why the resolution is so low, or why there hasn't been advancements, and he actually said because it's not really needed. when you're doing, like biomedical research, you don't need to blow up an image the size of like a mural. So for their sake, for scientific purposes, the size is okay the way that it is. So it's a very like pragmatic reason why I think the resolution is quite low for printing. Also, they don't have any reason to print it. It's all like data on the computer. The reason why I think there's one image of blood that has this like glitch in it. That's just from the scanner. It's not like a composite image. And sometimes the images, they get this like glitch, whether it comes from movement or like electromagnetic detections when it's scanning. Yeah, it just happens. So I decided to leave it there because it's part of the process. It's just like Hedevig's, that there's like dust or remnants of the technology. Yeah, I don't mind it.
There is another question for Tor-Finn. Your visual language is interesting to me as it is so overwhelming, saturated with information. Can you say something about your work, how you work with this language, and how you think about it in relation to an exhibition context, contra online platform, for example?
Okay, yeah. Okay, so there's two questions really. Well, I think that's a good description. Actually, saturated with information, because it brings in just also at the same time the visuals and the content, and I think that's a good description, because I was like, first of all, I have to say this is the first time I'm using such a visual language that is so saturated and so full of information. I guess I wanted to try to see how far it's possible to stretch that, while at the same time making something that's possible to take in, to see how far it's because I want to do stuff that is like kind of pleasant as well. And so the nauseating thing I was talking about, ad nauseam, that there should be too much of everything. That's the idea, but it should still be, you should still be able to process it in a sense. So that's the experiment, really, the visual experiment. And I started working with like green screen only for this project, and I think that's interesting. I think green screen is really interesting. It has this kitsch feeling to it, but at the same time, it's a possibility to isolate the things that you're talking about. So here you just have like this isolated object floating in like a non-space, and I think that gives many opportunities to actually talk about things without their context of society, and you have so many more tools to kind of so that's, I don't know if that answers those questions.
Yeah, I think we're soon reaching 5, and I think it has been an amazing session. If we were all together in a space, I would just say, let's get out of the space and we can have a drink and you can ask questions informally, so that for people that are more shy or like want to have more information directly and they want to ask one-to-one questions, which I'm sure there is a lot of people that would have loved to do that, and especially now. So what I can say now instead is that we really hope that we can reopen our space soon and give you access to to the exhibition space. We will keep you posted because the exhibition was actually scheduled to be to close on Sunday this week, but we're looking into different options. Of course, we will have to follow carefully the directives coming from the authorities. I'm just reminding you that on Saturday you can have a guided tour with Niels Munch-Blom on Instagram, and so you can actually see the works directly in the space and have a very subjective tour with him. You can also find documentation of the exhibition on the FFF website, so that you can really also, like, if you want to go back to some of the works, you can still see Tor-Finn films, and Yamile film may still be available for a few hours if you have missed prior to starting this conversation. If you want to contact the artist, I'm sure that they have all their email and contact on their website. Otherwise, please contact us and we can give you their contact. They will for sure be happy to receive more questions from you. Last but not least, we hope to put this on in Vimeo or YouTube. So if you have feedback, comments for us, please do not hesitate. And yes, thank you very much. In absence of an audience, I think we have to clap ourselves. Thank you so much, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Ciao.